Sup, sobers? Welcome to another sobering story with me, DJ Petrovsky, tight end. So a lot of times with addiction, it comes from you falling in with maybe the wrong crowd somewhere along the way. And then that wrong crowd leads to you making somewhat questionable decisions. And those questionable decisions lead to, down the line, maybe an addiction problem, or maybe you getting into some serious trouble because of substance use or just hanging around with the wrong people. But a lot of us kind of figure it out eventually and grow out of it, especially in recovery. Sometimes those rock bottom moments are a rude awakening that you have to make some changes. You got to figure this shit out. Like, you can't keep going the way you're going. One of the most difficult parts of recovery is having to leave behind some of not only your old habits, but some of the old people that you used to hang out with and sort of the old lifestyle that you used to engage in. And it can be really challenging because some of those people are actually friends. Some of those people are actually really close. Some of those people you've grown up with. And it can be challenging to let go of them or to find a way to be able to let go of them in the right way so that it doesn't harm your relationship. But in most cases, you find out who your real friends are in recovery because, well, you find out the people that stick around regardless of whether you are sober or not. Those are your real friends. Some people you just have to let go of because maybe they're too much of a trigger, and maybe you can bring them back into your life later, but I don't know. For me, I had to cut out quite a few people from my life just to make sure that I could stay on my track to sobriety. Now, for me, it was easier to let go of some of those people because I had good motivation behind what I was doing, and I knew that it was something I had to do for me. That sobriety, that choice to get sober is what led me to leave those people behind and led me to leave that lifestyle behind and focus on a new trajectory, aka, hey, what's up? And even though Aaron Hernandez had all of the pressures and he had all of the reasons in the world to get sober and get clean, he still chose not to. But he also had 40 million reasons to get sober because he had a $40 million contract with the New England Patriots. WTF, bro? Why would somebody throw all of that away just to be a gangsta, a wannabe gangsta, a wanksta? And I just figured in light of football season and with the whole new release of the dramatized series about Aaron Hernandez,
You don't know the kind of thoughts I have.
what better person to talk about than Aaron Hernandez?
Oh my God. Let me show you what I got. This beat is so hot. Oh my God.
Now, the other reason I wanted to talk about Aaron is because when I was doing the Wade Wilson story that I did a couple weeks ago, I just felt so many similarities between these two guys, not only in how they sound and how they look. They're all tatted up. They're both really pretty, tatted up boys. Just the way that they acted on top of everything else is so similar. And in my Wade Wilson story, I talk about how I think that he might have been suffering from CTE. As most of us know, Aaron Hernandez has the worst documented case of CTE that we know of currently. So yeah, it's just something that I saw the similarities between the two cases, and then with the whole series being released, I just figured, I don't know, why not? Let's talk about it. Where to begin this story? Where do we begin? There is so much to this story that it's hard to find a good starting place. But I think the easiest place to start would maybe be from the end. Aaron had been found guilty of the unaliving of 27-year-old semi-pro football player Odin Lloyd. Now, Odin Lloyd was also a good friend of Aaron because, well, Odin was dating his sister-in-law, and then on top of that, he was also his MJ dealer, so, you know, definitely close for that reason. And the two bonded over the fact that they both love football. They both grew up in kind of a rough area, and so football was kind of their out, and they both bonded over the fact that football was their stress relief, their therapy. It was just the one thing that they both had in common for sure. Now for Odin, this was huge because he was hanging out with a pro NFL player, and not even just a pro NFL player, one of the biggest pro NFL players at that time. So being around him, hanging around him, couldn't do anything but be beneficial for his football career and then his personal life as well. He talks about Aaron going out, dropping $10,000 on bottle service and just, you know, fun for the night. He talks about him throwing him the keys to his Suburban, just willy-nilly. Here, take the keys, bro. Have a good night. And he also talks about just taking him out all the time, showering him with, lavish experiences and just showing him what it's like to live as a professional NFL football player. So Odin was relishing every second of it. Any chance he could get to go out with Aaron, he was taking advantage of that. And so one night, the two of them, they go out with a couple of friends. And so they're out hanging out. Aaron and Odin are just talking when Odin sees two of his cousins come in. So he walks downstairs to say what's up to his cousins, and as he does that, he's like, yo, you should come hang out with me and Aaron. We're upstairs. Come chill with us. And the guys are like, his cousins are like, nah, man, we don't like Aaron Hernandez. Like, we're not about that. You should stop hanging out with that guy. He's a punk. And they start like gesturing towards him and mean mugging him and just making these like rude gestures towards him. The whole time, Aaron is picking up on all of this. He sees everything that's going on, and it infuriates him way more than it probably should, way more than a normal person would be mad about. So Aaron immediately gets fired up, but he doesn't necessarily say anything in the moment. So Odin's like, you know what, man, don't mess this up for me, you guys. I don't need you guys causing trouble. Like, I've got a good thing going with Aaron, and I don't need you messing it up. So he decides, you know what, we're just going to go our separate ways. I'm going to go hang out with Aaron. You guys go do your own thing. And as they leave, he goes back to hang out with Aaron, and everything seems to be just fine that night. And according to all, text messages and reports from Odin, it seems like everything was fine that night. It wasn't until a few days later that Aaron invites Odin to go out for a second time. Hey, man, I need to come pick up a bag of weed, and I was hoping that you might be able to come chill with me afterwards. Maybe we could go out, we could kick it. And so Odin's like, yeah, man, of course. Like, even though he just got put on full shifts for this next week, and he'd been out every single night this past weekend, he still was like, you know what? I can't pass up an opportunity to hang with Aaron Hernandez. I mean, it's Aaron Hernandez. What he doesn't know is that Aaron is still steaming from the other night and the way that his cousins were so disrespectful, quote unquote, to him. So because of this, Aaron's like, I'm about to show this guy, I'm going to teach him a lesson. So he calls up two of his thug buddies that he's been having hang around. He's got this guy, Ernest Wallace, who's his, full-time driver / bodyguard. And this guy, Carlos Ortiz, who I'm not really sure what role he plays in all of this, although I do know that the two of them would do PCP together. So he calls these two goons up, and they head over to pick up Odin, and then they're going to head over and go, kick it and do something. Odin's seen on a security camera from across the street being picked up by Aaron Hernandez's rental car, and they're seen taking off. That car reportedly drives out to an industrial park that's fairly close. And it's not too far away from Aaron's house, actually. On the way to this industrial park, Odin's sensing that something's just not right. Like, he's feeling like something's off. I need to make sure that I at least let somebody know who I'm with and what's going on, just in case. So he starts texting his sister and lets her know, like, hey, do you know who I'm with? And she says, no, who? And he says, NFL. And some people say, like, maybe he was just saying that to, like, brag. But honestly, he's hung out with Aaron multiple times already. So it's not like he needed to brag about hanging out with him anymore. It sounds like he was sending more of a distress signal, like, hey, just so you know, I want you to know I'm with NFL, a.k.a. Aaron Hernandez. And that leads us to believe that maybe something was fishy, something was off when he got picked up by Aaron that night. Maybe Aaron was pissed. Maybe he was in a fit of rage when it all happened. So anyways, Aaron drives him over to this industrial park. He tells him to get out of the car, but just Odin and Aaron get out of the car. And out of nowhere, he shoots multiple shots into Odin's chest. And unfortunately, Odin's left there to bleed out while Aaron, Ernest, and Carlos all take off in the car. Now, once they're back at Aaron's house, they're caught on video surveillance. Only 3 of them exit the vehicle. So it's obvious that Odin wasn't with them when they got back to Aaron's house. And then it's reported that they all 3 just went back in and went back to sleep and slept in, till the next morning. The next morning they wake up. Aaron has Ernest return the rental car back to Enterprise. And, they do a mild cleanup of the car. But what they failed to grab out of the car was a piece of Bubblicious bubble gum that was stuck to a shell casing that was used. So unfortunately, that's going to be one of the biggest downfalls and biggest pieces of evidence in this case against Aaron. But regardless, they return this car to Enterprise. They rent another car from Enterprise, which would be a Chrysler 300. And then they head back over to Aaron's house where they start to figure out what their next plan is in terms of getting away with this whole unaliving situation. However, it doesn't take cops very long to figure out what's going on. They find Odin's body the next day. A jogger is running out in that area and sees a body just laying out in the open. So obviously he calls 911. Police are notified. They come out. They check things out. Odin's phone is on his body. They immediately look through the phone. It's obvious he was hanging out with Aaron Hernandez. They see who the number that he was texting was. They also see the distress signals that he sent to his sister. So it doesn't take the cops very long before they start heading over to Aaron Hernandez's house to begin questioning him. Once they get to his house, they're there for about an hour, knocking on the door, trying to get him to come out, trying to figure out if he's even home. They knock on the neighbors' doors. They're starting to talk to neighbors around the neighborhood. And it's after about an hour that Aaron finally comes out to throw something in the trash. And when he comes out, he says, yeah, man, I saw you guys on the surveillance. I just didn't want to come to the door. So, I mean, already acting a little bit shady. But police take him in for questioning. And there's this notorious picture. It's called getting the Hernandez, when you have your arms inside of your shirt when you're getting arrested. I guess that's just to make it look like he wasn't getting arrested. I'm not really sure. It's just now it's a thing. So people getting Hernandezed. Now, there was a mountain of evidence against Aaron in this case. Not only the cell phone evidence from Odin's phone, but also Aaron's own cell phone. And his video surveillance system at home was also loaded with information, on top of the fact that he had his wife and himself destroy some hours of video surveillance that were on his home surveillance system. All very suspicious stuff. All very recoverable stuff, so the police didn't have any issue doing that. And so in April of 2015, Aaron is actually found guilty of the homicide of Odin Lloyd. And not only that, a month later, in May of 2015, he was actually sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The interesting thing about this case is that during the investigation, police found an SUV that was being stored at Aaron's cousin's house. Now, he used to live with his cousin for a short period of time because he had a lot of serious tension with his mom. Once cops discover this SUV, this is an SUV that they've been looking for over a year now. Police know that this SUV was involved in a double homicide 1 year earlier in July of 2012. So they're shocked, number one, to find this SUV. They also realize, shoot, we had maybe some inkling that Aaron Hernandez might have been involved back when the actual homicides occurred, but now that we're finding this SUV, we're wishing we followed up on those leads a whole lot better. They find this silver Toyota 4Runner, caked in dust, hasn't been driven in a while, and it's just being stuffed in this garage over at Aaron's cousin's house. This SUV was spotted and was the getaway car, and the reason they know this is because they have this vehicle on video surveillance leaving a parking garage, and they know that this is the vehicle that took off down the street following this other car before these unalivings happened. So Boston police already had an idea that Aaron might be involved, but once they found this SUV caked in dust, stuffed in his cousin's garage, obviously hiding it there was no question in their minds that Aaron was involved with this double homicide 1 year prior. And not only that, but the situation is all very similar. It's all very similar to something that's happened before. But while Aaron's serving his life sentence in prison, he is awaiting trial for this other double homicide because of his involvement with that. Now, because he was one of two people that were in that vehicle, he was not the driver. The driver of that vehicle was a man named Alexander Bradley. Now, this guy is a known criminal. He's a known dealer in the area, and he's also a really close friend of Aaron Hernandez, one of his guys in his inner circle. But this guy is tough as nails, and he's, just kind of one of those guys that, you don't really want to associate with unless you're a hardened criminal or you're a gang member or you're into dealing, things like that. So the fact that Aaron keeps him around and is hanging out with him is already a red flag. But regardless, they're out hanging out at this club. It's called the Cure Lounge. And while they're at this club, there's two guys there and they're just hanging out, having a good time. But a couple of these guys actually end up bumping into Aaron and spilling a drink on him. And because this guy spills a drink on him, it pisses Aaron off, completely pisses him off. He is so enraged that they get into this mini tussle inside the club. Now, obviously, security's not going to allow that to happen, so they take the fight kind of outside, but it doesn't really go anywhere. It kind of fizzles out. But Aaron is just so heated. He's still so pissed. He can't believe that this just happened. For whatever reason, he is just way pissed. So while they're standing outside, him and Alexander Bradley, they see the two guys that this all happened with taking off in a BMW and driving down the street. So they're like, hey, let's follow these guys. So they hop in their car, which is a silver Toyota 4Runner, and then they follow these guys down the road. Now they pull out of the parking garage, they go through a red light, and then they pull up next to this other car. Now Aaron yells out the window at them. He just yells like, yo, and then they don't really respond. Then he yells, yo, and then he says something else that I can't say because I'm white, and then he starts just shooting. 5 shots into this other BMW. He hits one of the guys in the head and he hits the other guy in the chest, is what he says, leaving both of them unalived immediately. Right after this, they speed off. It sounds like they went and took this SUV and hid it over at Aaron's cousin's house, where it wasn't to be seen or heard from again until this new investigation brought it back to light. Because there was no proof and there was no evidence of who the actual shooters were, nobody was actually arrested or found guilty of this crime until this discovery of this SUV a year later. So Aaron's sitting in prison, serving out his sentence, when another charge hits him while he's in prison. Because he was involved with this, with Alexander Bradley as well, the prosecutors try and utilize that to their advantage. So they try and get Alexander Bradley to testify against Aaron, saying that he was the shooter, because that's Bradley's story, is that Aaron was the shooter. And in order to do that, they offer him immunity in the trial, so he can't be prosecuted for anything, which makes sense. I mean, if he really didn't do anything, like, he's just an accessory because he was driving, but it sounds like he didn't really know what was going to happen because of the way he tells everything. It sounds like he had no idea Aaron was going to pull out a gun and shoot these guys. But regardless, he was still there. He was still an accessory, so offering him immunity so that he'll kind of rat on Aaron seemed like the best move in order for them to get a conviction, because they just didn't have the evidence that they needed. They had the vehicle that was used, but they didn't have the weapon that was used, and they also didn't have any eyewitness testimony putting him at the scene. So relying on so much circumstantial evidence, it made sense for them to get an eyewitness that was at the crime scene that could actually help them secure a conviction. However, the secret weapon that Aaron had on his side was he had Jose Baez, attorney extraordinaire. Now, if you're not familiar with Jose Baez, he's the attorney that Casey Anthony hired, who actually got her acquitted. And it's still crazy to me that he actually did that. But because of that case, he skyrocketed to fame. And Aaron Hernandez would then land as his second great acquittal case, because he was able to get Aaron off of these charges, because he kind of just flipped the script and made it seem like, well, of course he's going to testify against Aaron because he's trying to avoid getting himself in hot water. And so it's all kind of very interesting. But the one thing that they bring up in this whole trial is the fact that Aaron had actually shot Alexander Bradley in the face. Now, it was not very long after that double homicide that Aaron shot him in the face. The double homicide was in July of 2012, and Aaron shot him in February of 2013. So what is that, like 8 months? According to Mr. Bradley, Aaron had picked him up in February of 2013. They went out to a strip club where Aaron proceeded to drop about 10 G's on, strip club stuff. People that knew Aaron, friends of Aaron, would say that he was acting really paranoid around this time. And it was while they were at this strip club that they saw 2 guys sitting across from them. They had real clean-cut haircuts. And Aaron just was convinced that these 2 guys were undercover cops. And so he says out loud to Bradley, he's like, yo, man, I think those guys are undercover cops. They might be following us. And he's like, if they were, it's because of that dumb shit that you did 2 years ago. Now, when he says this, it sets Aaron off. And then on their way home, it was a pretty decent drive back. So Mr. Bradley said he fell asleep in the back seat. And when the car stopped at some point, that's when he woke up. And when he woke up, it was to a gun being pointed in his face with Aaron Hernandez behind it, and he pulled the trigger. The bullet went straight through his head, right above his left eye, right about here. Cruised all the way through his head, and Aaron immediately just opened the door and pushed him out of the car and left him there to bleed out. They drove off, thought nothing of it, but according to Alexander Bradley, at that point, he knew that he had to get up and figure this situation out. He's like, I can't just lay here and die. So he gets up, he starts walking, but he realizes he has this excruciating pain in his head. So he's realizing that he's not going to make it very far. And the only way to get any sort of relief on his head is if he lays down and puts some pressure on it. So that's what he starts doing. And he realizes that he starts to feel better, but he can't go anywhere at this point. Luckily, a passerby is walking by and sees this guy on the ground and runs over to check on him and see if he's all right. Unfortunately, no, this guy is not all right. So he calls 911, gets the ambulance over there. It takes him about 20 minutes to get there. And they finally arrive. They get him taken to the hospital. They get his head trauma checked out and taken care of. And eventually he's able to be released. And the crazy part is the only thing that happened is it blew his eye out. So he has like kind of a wonky one eye. It might even be just a fake eye. Besides that, he seems fairly normal. It's pretty wild that he survived that situation, let alone came out of it fairly normal. But the first thing that he said that he did after getting out of the hospital and being able to actually function on his own was he called Aaron Hernandez.
Now, when you woke up at the hospital after what you just described, was defendant Aaron Hernandez there?
No.
Were any of his friends there?
No.
Did you ever receive a phone call at the hospital from Aaron Hernandez while you were there?
No, I called Mr. Hernandez while I was there.
Tell us about the phone call to Aaron Hernandez when you woke up that next morning.
I called him, and I said, "What's up?" And he said, "Who's this?" And
What did you say?
I was like, "You know who this is? Like, it's me. It's your boy." Like, sarcastic with a sarcastic tone.
What was his tone?
He hung up,
He hung up?
hung the phone up, and I called him right back again. And
Did he answer?
Yeah, he was like, he was playing dumb. He was like, like he wasn't really saying too much, and he hung up again. And I called him back again. And I told him, like, I don't know why you keep hanging this phone up, because it's not like I told the police on you. You know, like, I ain't telling on you. Like, you know what time it is. When I get right, I'm coming back home. You know what time it is.
Did you know where he was at that point? If you know.
I didn't know for a fact, but he said, I'm still down here chilling, something along those lines.
Did he seem surprised to hear from you?
Oh, he was definitely surprised when he heard from me when I called
Why do you
him.
say that?
Because just from knowing Mr. Hernandez and the tone he was using, he was like, like, who's this? He was shocked. He definitely didn't think I was alive still.
And I'm sure that Aaron answered the phone and thought that he was talking to a ghost. That was probably the craziest experience of his entire life. He said he didn't rat on Aaron because he didn't want the cops to get involved, because his goal at the end of the day was not to get the cops involved and get him arrested for it. His goal was to take his life for it, an eye for an eye kind of a thing, pun intended. So this left Aaron looking over his shoulder for the next few months, so much so that he was even requesting to be transferred to a different NFL team or a different place in the NFL because he was scared for his life, and he was really worried if he stayed in that area that he may not make it out of that area. And I think he had reasonable suspicion to believe so. I mean, he just tried to unalive this guy, and now this guy is not unalived, and he's a pretty bad guy. Like, he's not just gonna roll over and take this. He's definitely going to come after you for this. So it makes a whole lot of sense. On top of that, he hires Ernest Wallace and Carlos Ortiz to kind of be his bodyguards. But these guys aren't bodyguards. These aren't hired help. These guys are just a couple of goons that, you know, don't have jobs. They don't have places to stay. They're known to have tons of priors on their rap sheet. And not only that, but I mean, these guys just don't have anything going for them right now. Very much just into substance abuse and mooching off of Aaron Hernandez's fame and fortune right now. So, I mean, you really think these guys are going to protect you, Aaron? Especially more so than you could protect yourself. You're a massive 6'2", freaking 300-pound dude. Like, you're trying to hire these chumps to protect you? It doesn't make sense, bro. Fortunately or unfortunately, I'm not sure which one it is for Aaron. In July of 2013, that's when the whole unaliving of Odin Lloyd happened. So there was no real chance for Alexander Bradley to seek his revenge, but he does show up in court and testifies against Aaron Hernandez and shares his story about what happened. So I think in a way he does get a little bit of his revenge, just not the way that he wanted it anyways. But like I said before, Aaron was acquitted of these charges. Because Alexander Bradley was granted immunity for testifying against Aaron Hernandez, basically what happened was nobody was found guilty of these two homicides, and technically somebody got away yet again with unaliving someone, and that person would yet again be Aaron Hernandez. And so it's just, I guess the one good thing in all of this is that he was at least charged and convicted of Odin Lloyd's case, but besides that, there's so many other bodies on his hands that he was just, I don't know, just because of his fame, it seems like he skated through and didn't have to face anything for it. But how did we get here? How did we go from being at the top of his career, at the pinnacle of success, NFL $40 million contract deal with the New England Patriots, to being sitting in prison with a life sentence, no possibility of parole? Why? Why, Aaron? Why would you throw it all away like this? That's the question that everybody has on their minds. That's the question that everybody wants to know. Why? I mean, literally, Aaron, he had what everybody dreams of having, and yet he took it for granted and he threw it all away over his pride, is basically what it sounds like. And as we'll get into later, there's other situations just like this that he's accused of that he also got away with because he's Aaron Hernandez. Similar to most of my stories, it's a compounding, exponentially growing, just a series of happenings that occur that lead to this person becoming who they are. But in order to start understanding how Aaron became Aaron Hernandez, we've got to go back and take a look at his dad, actually. Aaron's dad's name was Dennis, and he was a twin. His brother's name was David, and they were Puerto Rican, and they grew up in the Bristol, Connecticut area, which at the time was mostly an Italian, Irish kind of a community. So they didn't necessarily fit in, and they kind of had to learn to stand up for themselves and hold their own because they had to deal with kind of a lot of shit from the locals there. It was a pretty rough area, so like a lot of the young boys, they were getting into trouble, small petty theft, burglaries, things like that. But one thing they did really excel at was football. They truly excelled on the field, and for them to be able to play together and have that love together, it was truly a bonding experience for the brothers. Not only that, but they were really good at it. Dennis was a tailback and David was a wide receiver. So between the two of them, they were pretty much covering the field, you know, like just a dynamic duo. And they were so good, in fact, that both of them actually got a full ride scholarship to the University of Connecticut, which is already unheard of. But let alone for both of them to get a full ride scholarship for football just was a pretty rare and amazing thing to have happened. The two of them do end up going to University of Connecticut and playing football there for a little while, but because they start getting wrapped up into this crime and kind of just the rougher lifestyle that they were in, they end up deciding that they're going to drop out, probably because they start making money or seeing some sort of financial gain in this whole burglary thing. So they just drop out completely. They give up on this whole dream of football. And unfortunately for them, like I feel like they had so much going for them and they threw it all away to pursue this kind of, I don't know, darker lifestyle. They got involved with a guy named Rocco Testa, and this guy was a more serious criminal. He was kind of involved in more serious burglaries, car thefts, and things like that in the area. There was a particular night when Rocco, and they assumed that David and Dennis were both there as well. They got involved in this burglary where they were getting caught. And they got into a standoff with police, and an officer was actually unalived in a standoff with police. And then Rocco was actually arrested for this. Because of this, they think it might have scared Dennis and David straight. They might not have gotten caught, but the whole situation itself probably scared them straight. And it was shortly after this that the two of them started to try and turn their lives around. It's about this same time that Dennis meets a young lady named Terry Valentine, which is going to end up being Aaron and his brother DJ's mom. They settle down in a quaint little area, Bristol, Connecticut, on Greyhound Drive, purchase a little cottage home there, and Dennis decides at that time that he's going to completely turn his life around. He's not just going to settle down, he's going to make sure that his sons don't ever deal with the same stuff or get involved in the same stuff that he was involved in. And in order to do that, he becomes extremely strict, like overly strict. In fact, I wouldn't even call it strict. He becomes physically abusive. So DJ is Aaron's brother's name, and then Aaron Hernandez, of course, are being physically abused by their dad on a regular basis in order to kind of keep them in line and get them to do what he wants them to do. They're woken up every morning to hit the gym that he builds in their basement. He makes sure that they're turning their homework in. He stays really on top of their schoolwork. On top of that, he's making sure that they're involved in sports, extracurriculars, and that he's at every practice and he's at every single game. So he's just, I don't know, very much a tyrant drill sergeant dad, but he's trying to just make sure that he gives his boys the best. And if you want to know how champions are born, Well, that's how champions are born, I guess, because Aaron Hernandez and his brother DJ were both phenomenal athletes. All the way growing up, they were recognized as just being truly phenomenal athletes on the field, and then they were also really good at keeping themselves together in school. Now, even though Aaron was 3 years younger than DJ, Aaron was bigger, faster, stronger, and just was a far better athlete just because of his size all around than his brother was. So Aaron started to see more success with his athleticism than DJ did, but both of the boys were extremely talented. Aaron was born November 6th, 1989 in Bristol, Connecticut, where he would end up growing up and spending most of his time. It's also the place that would draw him back and would ultimately be his downfall. Now, even though DJ and Aaron's dad was super abusive to him, there was still so much love there. They absolutely adored their dad, and they would do anything for their dad. It's not really sure why. I mean, sure, he was abusing them, but it's clear that he just wanted the best for them. And obviously, they were seeing success in what they were doing. They were amazing athletes, and that's what their dad was trying to breed, was amazing athletes. They were amazing at basketball, track, football, pretty much anything they did. But unfortunately, when Dennis, which is their dad, went in for a regular hernia surgery, some sort of complication left him unalived on the operating table the following morning. And there's really no explanation. It was totally unexpected, and this just left everybody, most importantly Aaron, completely shocked and completely shattered. To make matters even worse, you'd think that at this time they'd be able to rely on their mom more heavily because, well, they just lost their dad, she just lost her husband. But no, instead of being able to rely on their mom, it comes to light that Terry's actually been having an affair with their cousin's husband. So it's very, very complicated now. It's very confusing. And to make it even worse, Aaron's mom brings this guy that she's been having an affair with into her house to move in with her, Aaron, and DJ. Aaron is not okay with this. And I probably wouldn't be either. I'd be like, what on earth, dude? Like, are you for real? So Aaron decides, like, no, this isn't happening. And ironically enough, he moves in with Tanya, who's actually the girl who this guy left to be with their mom. So kind of a weird situation. The weirdest little love figure eight I've ever seen. But because of that, Aaron's moving in over here with Tanya, and it gives him a little bit more freedom, but at the same time, they live in a pretty rough area. So it exposes Aaron to a little bit more rough, dark, sinister side of life. And likely this is one of those turning points that I would say is a heavy contributor to what ends up happening down the line with Aaron. Now, I did just want to briefly stop and say that in Aaron's case, we know that he has the worst documented case of CTE that we've seen so far. And the doctor that examined his brain also mentioned that the abuse, or like the damage to his frontal lobe that had happened, it was likely caused decades prior to him passing away. Now, Aaron passed away at 27 years old. So for him to have passed away at 27 and her to say decades prior, he had to have been either in his super early boy years, 8 to 10, or even in his early teen years. But regardless, he's been dealing with this abuse from his dad, and so it's likely assumed that some of that abuse was so bad that he must have gotten concussions or severe frontal lobe damage from some of these beatings. And that's kind of scary to think about. DJ even recalls having times where he would have to like blow on his brother's wounds because they were so bad from getting beaten by his dad. And just the fact that they would have to console each other and like tend to each other's wounds after their dad beat on them, that's truly sad. I mean, that's heartbreaking to hear. Super sad. Aaron lost the one person in his world that he felt like he could count on, who was guiding him, giving him direction, but he didn't really give him any actual skills, coping skills, life skills. It seems like he was almost doing it for them. He was so rigid and so controlling that if they didn't do what he wanted them to do, then they were just going to go off the rails. And now that he wasn't there to ensure they were doing what he wanted, it seems like that's exactly what happened with Aaron. He started going off the rails. He started abusing substances more, drinking more regularly, smoking regularly, and then using other substances that he wasn't already, messing around with. The only true escape that he was hanging on to that was a positive escape and a positive coping mechanism was football. Football was the one thing where he could pour his heart and his soul into it, and he was feeling so much better about everything because that is the one place in his life where he had actual guidance and direction, and he could find some of that fatherly love and then some of those fatherly roles from some of the coaching staff and some of the leadership on the teams. Now, Aaron didn't play tight end in high school. He was a wide receiver. He also played some defensive roles. And then on top of that, I think he also played as a running back sometimes. Now, Aaron was not only a phenomenal offensive player, he was also awarded in 2009 the Defensive Player of the Year award from Gatorade, which is a pretty serious award. I mean, it's throughout the entire state. And once he got this award, it actually opened up a whole wave of different scouts and people coming to check him out and see what's this Aaron Hernandez guy all about. Now, because of Aaron's love for his dad, and his dad's plan for him and DJ all along was for them to go to University of Connecticut and for them to excel and go play football for them. So obviously that was Aaron's first choice. He was like, I'm going to go to University of Connecticut, and I'm for sure playing football for them. But some of these scouts came from all over the country. He had scouts come from Florida. He had scouts come from Texas. He had scouts coming from all over the place. In particular, he had Urban Meyer coming from the University of Florida, the Gators. Let's go. And he was checking out Aaron Hernandez, seeing what this guy was all about. He was so impressed that he actually talked Aaron into not only reneging on going to University of Connecticut, he also talked him into graduating 1 year early and coming down at the age of only 17 so that he could learn their entire playbook and start practicing with the guys. I think another reason for that is he was seeing that Aaron was starting to get into some trouble. He knew Aaron's background story and his situation with his dad and his mom, and he kind of wanted to help out. This guy, Urban Meyer, has a history and a background of helping out players that may be a little bit down on their luck or maybe come from more rough backgrounds or just are a little rough around the edges in general. And so it honestly seemed like a perfect fit for Aaron. It seemed like a real perfect fit. He could get a little bit of that fatherly love that he was needing, a little bit of guidance, some direction, and on top of that, he'd be far enough away from home and distractions where he could really pour himself into school and pour himself into football, which is exactly what he should have been doing. And for the most part, that is what he was doing. It sounds like he was pouring a lot of himself into his school and into his football. He was even calling home talking about how difficult it was for him. He was talking about how it was a real challenge. And for a guy who had actually excelled for most of his life up till this point, for him to say that he was a little bit struggling was kind of maybe a little bit of an awakening moment for him. But the one thing that didn't change was he still liked to go out and party. Clubbing, partying, going out, that seems to be his pastime. That's how Aaron kills his time. He really enjoys doing that, obviously. And Aaron was lucky enough to come up with the greats of Tim Tebow and some other amazing players. But him and Tim Tebow actually were a real dynamic duo during their time at University of Florida. In April of 2007, Aaron goes out with Tim Tebow, and the two of them are at a bar. And when they're leaving, Aaron's just going to walk out. He's not going to pay the bill. He's over that. He doesn't do that. He's better than that. And as he's walking out, the bar manager comes chasing him with the bill and says like, yo, man, are you going to pay this bill? And out of nowhere, Aaron just, bam, sucker punches him right in the side of the head. Blows out this poor guy's eardrum. Luckily for Aaron, I don't know if the guy maybe was talked to by the coaches or somebody had to do something in order for this to happen, but Aaron wasn't ever formally charged and taken into court for anything, was never given any assault charges. Somehow it was handled outside of the courts. I'm not really sure what they did to handle it, but this is one of those experiences that Aaron is now starting to get away with him overreacting, being impulsive. He's getting a pass. He's getting a get out of jail free card. That's where you start to enable these kinds of behaviors, especially with somebody like Aaron Hernandez, where they're just so impulsive. They just fly off the handle at any moment. Fast forward to September of 2007. Aaron was out at a Gainesville bar with Reggie Nielsen and the Pouncey twins. And at some point, some guys walk by and try and steal the chain right off one of the Pouncey's neck. And then they take off and then they hop in a car and they, get in the car and take off like they're heading away. And they're all like, no, hell no. Like, we're going to chase these guys down. Like, what the hell do they think they're doing? While the car is stopped at the next red light just up the street here, 4 guys storm this car, and one of them pulls out a gun and fires a bunch of shots into this car. 2 of the shots hit 2 of the 3 of the guys in the car. One of them in the head, one of them in the arm. Luckily, both guys survived. Nothing worse happened. And the guy in the back seat was completely unharmed. And he was actually able to give a full account of what happened. and he described the shooter as being either a Hawaiian or Hispanic male with a bunch of tattoos. So immediately cops are like, we've got to get in all of these 4 players from this team. We got to figure out who it is that actually did this. They bring in all these guys for questioning, but it takes forever. It takes them like over 4 hours to get them in. And they don't even end up speaking with most of the teammates. They end up speaking with like the team lawyer that represents most of the teammates. When they get to Aaron Hernandez, they're just talking to these guys as possible witnesses. They're not talking to them as possible suspects. They just know that they were in the area when all this happened. So for Aaron to invoke his right to counsel when he's being questioned as a witness seems kind of strange. It seems a little bit, it seems like you're guilty if you do something like that. But regardless, that's what he does. And because they aren't able to talk to him, nothing's really ever figured out with this case. No charges are ever solidified. They don't have enough evidence or anything solid to charge anybody with. The only thing they have is this one eyewitness testimony, and eventually the eyewitness can't recall who was the actual shooter. And because he takes his statement back, they're never able to pursue any actual charges. So, yet again, Aaron likely got away with something that he shouldn't have gotten away with. But add this on to multiple failed P tests and multiple other instances where Aaron's just being violent in public and getting busted for it. Coaches had it with him. He's like, look, man, you either need to go into the NFL or you need to do something to get your poop in a group. And so they decide yet again, in a year early before he's ready to graduate after only 3 years of college, Aaron decides he's going to drop out of school, but he's going to open himself up as a free agent for the NFL. To be honest, he can do it. He's definitely got the skills as a football player to be able to do it. I'll show a few of his stats here. This is from his college days. I mean, the guy had tons of rushing yards, tons of touchdowns. I think he had 12 touchdowns. He's a phenomenal football player. And so his skills for sure could land him a spot in the NFL. The thing that's going to hold him back is the multiple run-ins with the law that he has, the negative reputation that he has. And on top of that, he has multiple P tests that he's failed. And not a lot of NFL teams are going to give you a shot when you have multiple failed P tests because, well, you're representing a brand. These guys are role models. They're not just game winners. They're out there representing the team. They're out there representing their communities. They're out there working hard to be role models for the youth of America. And so they've got a lot of weight on their shoulders, and they don't want these guys that are coming in that are going to have all these problems and attract all this negative publicity and negative attention for the team. So Aaron, no matter how good of a player he is, it's sometimes not worth the risk to bring on somebody that has that much heat on him. So in 2010, Aaron announced himself for the NFL draft and officially declared himself as a free agent and ready to play. And normally he would be a first-round draft pick right out the gates. He's that good of a player that you'd think that would be it for him. But unfortunately, he was skipped by 25 teams until finally the New England Patriots in the 4th round picked him and offered him a position as their tight end. They not only picked him, but they also picked a guy named Rob Gronkowski, which if you know anything about football, you know that these two guys revolutionized not only the tight end position, but just football in general and how the game is played. New England Patriots were using Aaron Hernandez and Rob Gronkowski, running both tight ends as if they were wide receivers, and using their sheer size, their massive hands, and their ability to get out of any sort of tackles to just dominate on the field. And then you couple that with freaking Tom Brady, like, man, watch out, NFL. Freaking superstar team coming ahead. The only way that Aaron was even able to convince the New England Patriots to give him a chance was because he wrote letters to all the teams saying that he would be willing to double down on his P tests during the season because he would be willing to commit to proving that he is following the straight and narrow, not just saying that he's going to. So I thought that was kind of noble of him, but at the same time, he really didn't have any other choice. So he drafted this letter with his agent and sent this out to all the teams. And on top of that, Bill Belichick, kind of like Urban Meyer, has a history of wanting to help those rough around the edges players and giving them a shot because, well, they're a superstar team, and honestly, the Patriot way really doesn't leave a whole lot of room for mistakes. It doesn't really leave a whole lot of room for error. You're on the field most of the time. You've got solid leadership with guys that are really good role models, and they're going to help kind of police the younger guys. So it seems like a really good atmosphere and a really good place to bring in someone like Aaron Hernandez. Honestly, had Aaron really taken to the whole Patriots NFL experience, I think he might have actually done a lot better than what he did. According to the Patriots, Aaron was kind of a rogue. He didn't really hang out with the teammates. He didn't really celebrate with anybody. Right after games, he would take off smoking multiple blunts in his car as he took off. He never did any sort of team building events, never hung out with anybody on the team. And it was said he was kind of like a lone wolf. And I think that was because he was always back home playing fake gangster, wanted to be wannabe gangster. And now he had all this money to where he could really pretend to be a gangster. Now, Aaron was a phenomenal football player, and he joined a phenomenal football team. In his first year playing, he made it to debut in an AFC championship game. He actually, in his very first game in a preseason game, caught a 45-yard pass. And not only that, but he was accepted to be a member of the Pro Bowl that year in his first year playing. So as a rookie, he was invited to the Pro Bowl, which I think is crazy. Just shows the level of skill that this guy had on the field. And not only did we think that he was a good player, but the Patriots felt like he was a good player too, because they offered him a $40 million contract to sign with them for the next 5 years. $40 million. What would you do with 40 mils? I don't know what I would do. I'll tell you what he didn't do, though. He didn't buy his mom a house like every other football player does. And that's because his mom, well, she fucked that whole relationship up, I think. So he was like, nah, sorry, Mom. I'm going to probably just spend this on all my goon friends and substances. Now, the craziest part about this $40 million contract is that Aaron accepted this $40 million contract after having unalived 2 guys outside of a nightclub and then taken off in an SUV. Somehow, this guy is so whacked in the head from this CTE and his substance use and his need to be a wannabe gangsta that he played an entire season after having unalived these 2 guys and not saying anything to anybody. According to people that were close to Aaron, and one of those people being Odin Lloyd, it said that he was into way harder stuff than just smoking Mary Jane. It said that he was into doing angel dust. Sometimes he would do crack. There's not any other real proof that he was doing these things, but he was alleged to have done much harder substances. And if we know one thing about angel dust, it's that it makes you extremely paranoid and it makes you extremely violent. So on top of the CTE, impulsive, violent behavior, he's also mixing it with angel dust, which causes extremely irrational, violent, crazy behavior. And on top of that, it makes you super paranoid. So Aaron it sounds like he was going off the rails at this point. Honestly, I can kind of understand it. He just kind of found himself in this massive $40 million contract deal. He's swimming in money. He's living his dream life. And he can pretty much do whatever he wants. On top of that, anything wrong that he's ever done, he's gotten a pass from that. He's never been charged or convicted of anything. He's literally just had a free ride this entire time. And he's been riding off the fact that he has such great football skills that people are willing to kind of look the other way, no matter what he does. That is, however, until we come up to the unaliving of Odin Lloyd. People are not willing to look the other way on this. And we have definitive proof and definitive evidence, which actually gets him convicted and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole in 2015. Now, in Massachusetts, it's a very historical, old school place, especially when it comes to the law. And according to the law, there's this really old, century-old law there. It's called the abatement law. And how that works is if someone is going through a court proceeding for some sort of charge, whether it be an appellate court or a judicial court, if that person passes away during the court proceedings, then their case is immediately thrown out and the charges are dismissed against them because they weren't alive to stand trial, they weren't alive to testify on their own behalf, they weren't alive to represent themselves. So for that reason, they say that they should be dismissed and they shouldn't have to actually be found guilty of those charges. That can have serious ramifications, especially in terms of like life insurance and the way that we operate nowadays because of how people can get inheritance and certain payouts from someone passing away. So the times have definitely changed. That's sort of an outdated law for sure. But in this case, it's something that a lot of the inmates at the prison that Aaron was at, the Salza Baranowski State Prison in Lancaster, Massachusetts, a lot of the inmates there are pretty hip to this law because it's a pretty unique one. And especially if you're serving a life sentence or if you're on death row, it might be beneficial for you to pass away so that your family can get some sort of inheritance or have your case thrown out. You know what I mean? This abatement law could benefit you. And that's what they think was the case for Aaron Hernandez. They think that maybe the inmates at this prison told him about this law, or maybe it's something he already knew. And some of the proof of that is in the letters that he leaves behind. But unfortunately, Aaron Hernandez was found hanging unalived in his cell from self-inflicted wounds on April 19th, 2017. They tried life-saving measures, but they didn't do anything, unfortunately. Now, he left 3 letters behind when he did this. He left one to his wife, he left one to his daughter, and he left one to his lawyer. And all of them have some interesting information, but the most interesting piece of this was the letter he left to his daughter. He left a bunch of, I love yous and stuff. I'll be there with you always. But he also said at the bottom of the note, "You're rich," and underlined it multiple times. And so that's why they think that he maybe knew about this abatement law and was trying to utilize that law in his favor to be able to get his New England Patriots payouts to his family for him passing away. Since he passed away, his trial would be thrown out because of this abatement law. He wouldn't be found guilty of these charges. And because of that, he would not actually have to lose any of the finances that he was going to lose, and his family would still be taken care of. For a guy who's facing a life sentence, it is kind of a no-brainer. Like, I would probably do the same thing. Now, crazy enough, Aaron Hernandez actually was cause for some major law changes because of the whole abatement thing, because he was found not guilty and they threw out his conviction. That fired up Odin's mom. She was not going to sit down and take that because he was definitely guilty of that, and there's no reason why he should have been found not guilty. And she just didn't see it as being fair to her Odin. So she wanted to fight for him and fight for justice for him. So she actually brought that to the Supreme Court, and she was actually able to get his conviction reinstated and have the abatement law overturned. So that actually is no longer a law anymore, which I thought was some pretty crazy stuff. This whole case brought about some serious law changes. And also it's a law that I'd never heard of before. I did not know about the abatement law until this case, and obviously we won't really need to know about it anymore. But man, what do you guys think about this case? What do you guys think about Aaron Hernandez? What do you think about the whole CTE connection with the Wade Wilson thing? Because I honestly feel like, I should play a little bit of a phone call here just to give you an idea of how similar these two guys sound. Like you'll have to go back to my Wade Wilson video and listen to that and listen to how he sounds in those jail phone calls. And then listen to Aaron Hernandez and how he sounds in his jail phone calls. I swear, man, the guys just have so many similarities. It's just wild to me. But I want to know what you guys think. Drop it in the comments below.
Well, your shoulders are fucked up too? But I wake up to a casino and basketball and all activities, so I'm living the life. A casino? Yeah, I'm saying people play. There's a poker table, spades table, whist table, cribbage table. Oh, really? Chess table. And then you can play handball and basketball outside, shit like that. Nice. Yeah. Handball. Yeah, I was playing that all day. Play handball? It's like tennis, handball? But it's the same thing as tennis, but you play with your hand. And it's one of those blue rectangles. Yeah, I know what it is. I know what it is, guy. I know what it is. You don't gotta explain it, guy. You play that, though? Yeah, all day. That's fucking awesome. Small hands. Oh, shit. I'm fucking outside. I'm freezing my ass off. I hear you. But yeah, fucking glad I finally fucking got your call.
But to me, this is just such a tragic story. Aaron literally was living what most people dream of. Like, people literally dream of being in the NFL, especially people who play football. And people would love to have that kind of money and be able to buy whatever they want. For me, if I was getting a $40 million contract to keep my nose clean and do the right things and say the right things, like, I would do that, especially if I had a family to take care of. I would make sure I was doing everything possible to get that bag, baby. Like, there's no weed or anything that's going to keep me from, that's going to entice me to want to go down and try and be a wannabe gangsta. Like, I swear, I just can't even understand where that need was coming from. But in a in a report, there's all these tests and evaluations that these NFL football players have to go through. And in one of the evaluations that Aaron underwent, he scored a level 1 out of 10 on social maturity. So I think because of his intense brain damage, the intense CTE, I think he had severe frontal lobe damage. And frontal lobe is where your decision making comes from. So the fact that he had the social maturity on a level 1 makes a lot of sense to me, actually, because CTE will do that to you. CTE will also make you make impulsive, irrational, stupid, violent decisions like he did, and make you throw away a perfect life that you've built for yourself. It's not like Aaron was just handed these things either. He worked his ass off. He played so hard. He would get up and work harder than anybody at practice. He would go in the gym in the morning before practice. He was doing everything he needed to be doing to be a superstar athlete, and he was willing to throw all of that hard work away over his pride, really, and over his substance use. Because really, if he wasn't using substances, he wouldn't be associating with the people he was associating with. And no offense to Odin Lloyd, but even being a weed dealer is the reason that Odin was even involved with Aaron in the first place. So I don't know. It's just there's just so many pieces and parts to this puzzle, and there's probably way more I could have dove into, but in the essence of time, I didn't want to be here for 3 to 4 hours. So there is a really good Netflix special I highly recommend. You can check that out if you want some more details on the case. There's tons of information on YouTube here, and then there's also that new dramatized special, but I'm not really big on the dramatization series. I just feel like they add fluff to make it more punchy, and I don't really like that. I want to get facts. I want the facts, baby. I want the dirty, hard, cold facts. But yeah, I don't know. I really appreciate you guys sticking around for this long. If you guys want to check out some of my other sobering stories, I've got a playlist right here. It's got all of my other sobering stories I've done so far, including the Wade Wilson case. I will include the Wade Wilson case at the end of this episode, though, in the the little card at the end. So if you don't subscribe to my channel, please subscribe. It does help me. I'm still trying to hit 1,000 subscribers so I can get this channel monetized. Yeah, I can bring you guys more stories and make this like a full-time thing if I can actually monetize it. So yeah, I really appreciate you guys sticking around. I appreciate all the love, and don't forget to comment below what you think. And if you have any comments about cases you want me to cover or things you want me to talk about in the future, please let me know. I'm always down for recommendations. But that's all I got for you guys. Later, sobers.
Oh my God. Let me show you what I